Hello. Um, Hopefully, if you're watching these in order, the last one you watched was on the Truman Doctrine, which was about President Truman of America in 1947 saying he's going to stop the spread of communism, to contain the spread of communism. Right, pretty straightforward. And that's all well and good for Truman to say, I'm going to stop the spread of communism, but he needs a plan on how to do it. So, the plan of how to stop the spread of communism is the Marshall Plan. All right? Now, or Marshall Aid, Marshall Plan, same thing really. So, question on the Marshall Plan could follow one of three styles essentially: the causes, the events, or the consequences / results of Marshall Aid or Marshall Plan. That could be a key features question, it could be give one reason for the Marshall Plan, give one consequence of the Marshall Plan, that sort of idea. By now you're pretty familiar hopefully with the exam structure, and so you should be able to question spot. So, let's follow the regular pattern. The causes of Marshall Aid, Marshall Plan. Okay, I reckon there are four. Okay. First of which, funnily enough, as you can pretty much work out, is it's to prevent the spread of communism. It's part of Truman's policy of containment. Again, let's use the right terminology because it makes us look clever. All right. Secondly, Truman wanted to rebuild the European economies after World War II. Now, this is quite clever because the European economies had been destroyed by all the fighting going on, since 1939, 1940. And they'd had the Germans come in, and then the Russians come in, and the British and the Americans come in, and lots of these economies are in pretty rubbish state of repair. Now, when economies are bad, people are poor, and when people are poor, what you tend to find is that communism becomes more attractive. That's because everyone has less, so it becomes quite attractive to share everything out equally. When economies are good and people are wealthy, they don't really want to share it with people that are less well off. Bottom line, when economies are weak, communism is attractive. So Truman says, let's build the economies up, therefore communism won't be attractive, and communism won't spread. Quite a long-winded explanation there, sorry. Right, the third one is that Truman hoped that Marshall Aid would encourage some Eastern European economies and countries to break away from Soviet control. If he offers this carrot, money, Marshall Aid, people will move away from Stalin in the East and come towards the Western camp. Now, and the fourth reason, which is really clever, my personal favourite, I think this is brilliant, is he's not a stupid man, as you'd expect from an American president. And what he says is, look, if we rebuild European economies, it's actually going to help us. It's going to rebuild or help build the American economy, make America even stronger. Because you can give the money to Europe, or the machinery to Europe, or the goods to Europe, but what they then need to do is sell that stuff that they're making. Now, who do they sell it to? They can sell it to other European countries, but also to America. But also they need to buy raw materials as well. So it's very good for America. It creates new markets for American goods. Now, a lovely little quote here from a favourite of mine, Winston Churchill. He kind of describes Europe after the Second World War as a rubble heap, a breeding ground of hatred. Okay, super easy to remember. Throw it in your answer. It clearly explains that the European economies had collapsed after the Second World War. They were a rubble heap. And because of that, because everyone had nothing, they were a breeding ground of hatred, i.e. communism is very attractive. Okay? So, Truman sends off his top guy, General Marshall, to have a look at Europe, and Marshall comes back and goes, "Hoo, it's not very good, we need to help." And so Marshall comes up with a plan, and cunningly it's called the Marshall Plan. And his plan is to give aid to Europe. It's called Marshall Aid. All right, it's very, very tricky, this bit. Okay. So, officially, the Marshall Plan is known as the European Recovery Plan, ERP. Ooh, that will get you some nice marks if you can show that as well. All right, ERP. Now, that's the causes. Events. Right. America offers grants of machinery, money, etc., materials to all European countries, and that's really important. They offer it to everyone. Everyone. The most common mistake is people think they only offer it to the West. They don't. They offer it to everyone. Thing is, only the Western countries accept. Now, Marshall basically invited everyone from Europe that was interested in getting some of this free cash and stuff to come to a big meeting and to decide how the US aid would be spent in 1948. Now, to qualify for Marshall aid, this free stuff, money and resources, you had to join the OEEC, the Organisation for European Economic Cooperation, OEEC. Put that in your answer, that shows knowledge, that's good. Okay? Now, and the OEEC, as the name suggests, Economic Cooperation, decided how the money would be spent. I mean, there's no point France building railways if Germany's building roads, because they won't link up and it won't coordinate Europe and help the whole European economy grow. Now, the USA, because it's their money, is going to be very, very, very influential in how this money is spent. Now, Stalin was a very clever man, and he realised that actually the OEEC was an attempt by America to influence Eastern European countries. And so what he did was he forbade all Eastern European countries from accepting aid. Okay, bear in mind he's got control because there's lots of communist countries there, the rigged elections and all that stuff, the coalition governments from the previous section about Soviet expansion. So Stalin's got a huge amount of control. And he says, no, it's an attempt by the USA to bribe you. They're trying to buy you with dollars. It's not happening. So he forbids them all. So, essentially what you get is 16 Western European countries accepting US aid. And by 1953, they'd received $17 billion. Now, some books will say 13.5, some will say 17 billion. But let's face it, between friends, what's $4.5 billion? It's a heck of a lot of money, whatever. Marshall aid is an enormous amount of money, 13 or 17 billion dollars. Italy, for example, received $600 million in aid. Right, so that's the events. Offers it to everyone. OEEC set up. Stalin refuses to allow Eastern European countries to accept it, so 16 Western European countries accept $17 billion. Results, consequences of Marshall Plan. Funnily enough, the West recovered really quickly because it had all this huge amount of cash. It increased its standard of living, its economies grew. Secondly, the Marshall Plan divided Europe, East and West, capitalist and communist. And thirdly, in direct response to the Marshall Plan, Stalin set up Comecon, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, in 1949. And this is essentially where Russia was going to give aid to Eastern European countries. It's the Soviet version of the Marshall Plan. All right, causes, events, results, fairly straightforward. 4 causes, 5, 6 events, 3 results. Okay, hope that's of some use.